Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Meet America. I'm Annie Griffin, your host, and we have some breaking news, very upsetting news. As you know, I report on the wild horses, the slaughter of our horses, because they are our nation's icon. And what is happening to the horses is something that this government, if they can be so callous and so cruel as to slaughter such an amazing, wonderful animal that we owe so much to, what can they do to us? What kind of heartless people are in there going against the laws that have been created by the American people, and just blatantly thumbing their noses at us and doing what they want and lying and selling our horses off to slaughter. And so now we have another situation. Nevada, as you may or may not know, is one of the richest resources, or was until a couple of years ago, of our wild horses that are being removed illegally and criminally by the BLM under the Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar. And we have with us on the phone today a Willis Lamb who gave me a report recently that now the Virginia City little herds of horses are being removed by the Department of Agriculture. And I'm asking everyone to please boycott Nevada. If you're planning to go up there for vacation, don't go. Just call the governor's office. This is the number up there. That's Governor Sandoval. And call him and let him know that, you know, you've heard what's going on and you're telling your friends, and we're going to be boycotting Nevada until they return our wild horses so that we have something to go to Nevada to watch, because it's all desert. There's nothing really there. And the wild horses were one of the most exciting things for people to go and watch, and they're basically have disappeared. So welcome to our program.
Wow, well, thanks, Andy. That was quite a strong endorsement for our Nevada's wild horses. Geez, I'm impressed.
Well, thank you. I'm very upset, as a lot of people are, and I'm calling for this boycott because I think it's our only tool to sort of rein in and get the gaming industry to start talking to these governors and these Department of Agriculture people and saying, look, you're hurting our industry. Now, do you know anything about that? I heard there was a report from the University of Nevada last year that the gaming industry is hurting. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, okay. Boy, we're going a whole lot of different directions here. As far as tourism revenue, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, keeps statistics on the state's gaming revenues. And the gaming revenues are a good indicator of overall tourism, the hospitality industry, and, of course, gaming. Those items comprise Nevada's most important economic sector. Approximately 40% of Nevada citizens derive their income directly or indirectly from gaming, hospitality, and tourism. So it's a big deal for us. We had some horse issues come up in 2011 that were controversial, and the public responded as they normally would. You know, horses are beloved by a lot of people, and this is my concern as a Nevadan, that we don't necessarily repeat what happened then. But in April 2011, after the public got a little bit upset, gaming dropped by $152 million the following month. That's April of 2011. And April's not the strongest month because of tax time and so forth, but we've never seen anything like that. So the public can speak with its pocketbook. I would kind of prefer that we rattle the sabers and people take notice. But nonetheless, money talks, and that seems to be all that some of these folks are concerned about, and especially when it comes to our Virginia range horses. It's such a historic herd.
Well, is there anything on YouTube that the public can watch while we're discussing this? Any pictures of this little Virginia herd that you know of? Yes,
there's a number of different things up on YouTube and other forms of internet media. That's one of the easiest ways to find them.
All right, so we're now going to see the horse horses, as seen through Carol Abel. So why don't you tell us the story about what's going on in this Virginia range and why the Department of Agriculture is rounding them up?
The wild horses of Virginia range are historic. In fact, they were the horses that Belmont Wild Horse Annie Johnston first tried to protect back in the 1950s. And actually, they were subject of the very first wild horse protection laws, although those laws have pretty much been superseded over the years. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, contiguous herd of wild horses left in North America. And it's one of the most accessible to tourists, which is why we think that it's important for our tourism economy. It's an attraction. We have people coming from all over the world to see these animals. It's one thing that Nevada has that many other places don't. And you just about go into the state and visit a casino anymore. So we need people to come up and see something that's uniquely Nevada, and the wild horses uniquely Nevada. Unfortunately, the present administration doesn't feel that way, and the Sandoval administration is pretty much eradicating the horses as rapidly as they can, which, of course, has a lot of Nevadans upset, has a lot of American public upset. The thing that's most hideous about this, some of the BLM horses have fallen through the cracks, as you stated, and people have taken advantage of the BLM's horse placement program and have converted horses to food, even though that's technically not legal. In Nevada, basically all bets are off. The governor's people are picking up these horses by hook or by crook, hauling them off to the livestock sale, and the advocates not only have to bid against the kill buyers to acquire the horses so they can be placed in sanctuaries and with private adopters, which, by the way, California has stepped up to the forefront. Our greatest number of our horses are going to California, so thank you, Californians. But worse than that, there's a game going on where the bids are being shilled, so we're actually bidding against the house. The wild horse groups are paying 3 to 4 times the market value of ungentled, untrained horses when the Virginia range horses come up. So not only are they ripping off the horses from the range, and this is something that does not sit well with the majority of Nevadans. We have an administration that doesn't care, but we have an administration that thinks it's cool to rip off charitable organizations. So what's with that? It's just plain crazy here.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, the BLM, it cost the taxpayer $1,000 per head of horse to round up each horse. And the BLM is selling these horses to Tom Davis by the truckload for $10 a head. And BLM is saying, oh, we trust him, and yet he's a known horse advocate, horse slaughter advocate. And,
yeah, that's true.
So this kind of criminal behavior is not only illegal, but I mean, it just smacks of the worst sort of destruction of our laws and disrespect for our laws, so that the people themselves no longer want to obey the government because the government doesn't obey its own laws, and that creates chaos, So
let's just so we don't confuse your audience. We have 2 different issues here. We have the BLM horses that are on federal land, and those horses are supposed to be protected. If you acquire these long-term holding horses, and they let you have them at a discount, they basically just don't want to feed them anymore. The BLM's accumulating them, lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, they're just overrun with horses. You sign an affidavit stating that you're not going to convert the horses over to any kind of commercial product, but the problem with that is, how do you enforce it? And we thank former Senator Conrad Burns for slipping a stealth rider into an appropriations bill back in '04 for causing this to happen. So he opened the door for the federal horses, their welfare, to be manipulated, and people rose up and he didn't get reelected. So, but nonetheless, that particular stealth rider is still on the books, and Congress is yet to repeal it. On the state level, the state horses have a lot fewer protections. They do have some protections. There are laws passed by the state legislature that the Department of Agriculture is supposed to follow, and where we get the most testy with the department is, like you say, they just kind of thumb their nose at the law and do whatever they want to. And I could take up a whole episode here talking about all the things that they do. The end product is they're snagging horses off the range, any excuse they can get, and they're shipping them to the livestock. That is not what the state legislature had. And the other thing is that the state legislature had set up a system where nonprofit groups in each of the areas where the horses ranged would enter into cooperative agreements with the Department of Agriculture to help manage the horses and to place horses that were excess or tended to get into trouble or were getting on the highways. So there was a management scheme where the nonprofits shouldered the bulk of the labor and the costs. So, the department comes out and says, well, we can't afford to manage the horses. Well, of course you can't. The legislature determined that you should delegate that through agreements with the nonprofits. But they refuse to do that. They want what the end result, the goal seems to be, and it's come from several sources, is the department wants to be able to go to the legislature, throw up its hands and say, it's impossible for us to manage these horses. The horse groups can't absorb all of these horses, and the sky is falling and all that, and try to get the law changed so they can go back to the days of mustanging. If horses show up on your property, you can catch them, post a notice to make sure that it's nobody's personal horse, then you can go sell them, give them to the kill buyers, whatever you want to do. And that's where we see this thing headed. We're going back to the 1950s, and we just can't let that happen. These are America's icons.
Well, it's just so blood-mongering, and it's such callous disregard for the American people and everything that we stand for and love. And to me, it's the demons have gotten in power, and they're doing what they want, and they answer to no one. And I'd like to say here that what is their reason for removing these wild horses?
Well, the reason is they don't want horses on the range. Once in a while, this is a fence. I'm going to back up a second. This is a fenced-out state. If you don't want cattle, horses, sheep, whatever's out there on the range on your property, you're supposed to fence it out. We have a couple of developers that didn't completely fence their developments over a period of time, and it wasn't necessarily all their fault, but just the planning departments at the time didn't require these developments to be isolated, and then they end up putting in California-style landscape with lots of grass and streets with grassy medians, and wonder why the horses show up to graze each day. Or they develop around the only water source in the area, and they don't provide some mitigation for wildlife and wild horses. So you have everything from horses to deer to Lord knows what, running through the neighborhoods to go get water. So there was some bad planning here. The thing is, if you have the right information, sell on the Federal Network, you can get the government to work for you, in spite of the fact that it alienates diverse to significant majority of the state's population. But we don't hobnob and we don't give the large campaign donations and so forth. And this is a pretty primitive state. You think Chicago's, come to Nevada. It's just how it works. Well, as long as they're not, doing something that's fundamentally cruel, we live with it. But now it's gotten over the top. And if you challenge the state, they're people that are going to use their power to threaten you, and it's not a good thing. And we need to let this administration know that it's not what the public's going to tolerate. The problem you're going to have is they won't want to talk to you.
Well, that's how they manage to do everything. They don't talk to you, and they never return your calls, and they ignore us. And the American people are realizing that more and more, that this is happening, and that end result is nothing short of a revolution eventually, because we can't get our voices heard on any level. And it's like
what happened with King George, I mean, seriously, if we want to watch history repeat itself on a little smaller scale here, but we have an administration that's aloof. You want to file a complaint about the Department of Agriculture, they transfer you to the Department of Agriculture. We don't want to talk to the Department of Agriculture. That's who we're complaining about.
That's right. Exactly.
We want to talk to somebody at the governor's office. Good luck. I mean, the thing is, people need to make their calls. They need to express their opinion, and they need to try to speak to somebody to express their opinion. And we have two issues here. The most pressing is the Virginia range horses. They're being rounded up daily. And then the other one is that.
And how many do you estimate are out there?
Virginia range horses. We've probably got about 1,600 or so left on the range. Which is a lot of horses, but we've got we've got well over 100 that have been brought in the last month and a half, which again doesn't seem like a large number, but in the old days the department tried to manage the herd, and when horses needed to come off, it was done in a way that now they're trying to so far we're keeping up. We're picking up 29 horses at the auction Wednesday night. The week after that, we'll be picking up more horses. We just got 53 horses a couple of weeks ago. So, we're handling a lot of horses. Number one.
And the governor and the Department of Agriculture could just work directly with you and say, okay, we're going. Yeah. And so, but instead they send them to these livestock auctions where they know the horse buyers are bidding on them, and then that raises the price to an unaffordable, unacceptable degree where then you're suffering and you can't afford to rescue them all. I mean, this is the cruelty of the government.
Yeah, let me throw this at you. Okay, we were at the auction a few weeks ago. The Virginia range horses were being pumped up to $500 to $600 a piece. One of the volunteers there who was helping acquire the horses saw a titled horse come through. Because there's all kinds of different horses. This was a titled horse.
What does titled horse mean? A
titled horse means that was a horse that was owned by somebody. It was somebody's horse that they couldn't keep any longer, and they sent to the auction.
Right.
It's not a wild, free roaming horse,
right?
Which would normally have more value, usually a little more weight, and it's a tame horse. The wild horses were going for $600, sometimes $700. This other horse came up. The same lady that was bidding on the wild horses bid on that horse. It went for $150.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you can see the game that's being played. Now, this is all charitable money. This is money that people from varying incomes, from folks that can write large checks to, somebody who says, I'm going to send you $20 and I'll do it up my, my custom coffee in the morning. But that's all I can afford. That's what these people are putting in to make sure that these horses don't end up, taking a trip to Mexico and getting hit over the head with a sledgehammer. We're trying to redirect these horses into the adoption stream. Now, if we had an intelligent director of agriculture, and believe me, this guy's not a Mensa candidate, he'd figure out that the way the law works, if he turns the horses over to the group, then he's entitled to collect his expenses from the groups, and that's fair. If you have money involved in getting the horses to us, he's entitled to collect that. But then when these groups place the horses with adopters, and everybody in California, remember, California is the #1 horse adopting state in the country. So it's significant to California. Over the average lifetimes of these horses, and this was based on Sonoma State and Texas A&M figures, and this was before the recent increase in the price of everything, it was calculated that the average horse would provide $25,000 worth of agricultural stimulus to the economy in the region where that horse is adopted. This is money that disposable income that people who adopt choose to spend on hay and things that are produced right here in the local area where the horse is adopted versus a form of consumer product. So, it really does benefit the local agricultural economy. Obviously, what's wrong with making the system work correctly? Everybody can benefit. But the groups got a little testy because we caught the department violating the law a few times, and they wouldn't run the horses out on the proper paperwork, and so we bitched about it. And this is their response,
Well,
take us to the cleaners.
I'm asking everyone watching this program to please tell all your friends to boycott Nevada, period, the end, and to call the casinos if you were planning to go up there and go to the casinos and play, call those casinos and cancel your trip and say it's because of the wild horses. And I guess it's Mr. Barbary, or is it Barbie? Mr.
Like
Barbie,
yeah.
I mean, it's no point in calling him, but, people can call the Governor Sandoval's office and let him know that we're just going to be boycotting his state, and it's just hurting more and more. And then finally, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how they're gathering up the pregnant mares with the foals and allowing them to be exposed to the horse killers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, we just sent to California 6 mare and foal pairs that we got from the auction weeks ago. And some of these are little guys, but they're a delicacy, in Europe. And, if you're European, you're over there, eat whatever you want to eat. That's your business. But it's just not an American thing to do. And I can't deal with it. It's just,
well, it's diabolical.
Exactly
it's
right.
as close to diabolical as anyone can get,
Well, this governor just doesn't share our values, and he needs to know about it. And my hope here is that if enough people let the governor and some of these, casino operators know how they feel, that it'll put enough pressure to fix this thing. We don't want to. I would rather not have horses continue to be at risk and have people have to cancel their plans. If we can get a convincing response, so that folks take this concern seriously. And I tell you, in California, we love it when you come to Nevada, but you have the right to do whatever you want to do, and this makes you.
Well, I think it's the only thing that can really help, because they're not going to listen to anything else. They listen to money, and that's all they listen to. And they don't have any morals. They don't have any sort of loyalty to their position. These are corrupt criminals, in my opinion, that are put there because of their insensitivity, because of their lack of morals, and so they are. That's what they do. But that all, shimmers on down to us, the people, because it's just a matter of time before they start rounding us up. I mean, it's getting to that point. People can see it. The TSA and how they're trying to take our guns away from us and our ability to defend ourselves against criminals is just so blatant now. So
the government is not responsive to the people.
Well, they aren't.
The people's rights start to become encroached.
Absolutely.
My mother worked for General Eisenhower in Berlin after World War II.
Yeah.
And part of it was during the Nuremberg trials and stuff, it laid out the roadmap on how little by little by little, your rights get taken away, and then pretty soon you reach that tipping point, and that's when we get, sort of a totalitarian regime. We don't think it can happen here.
Yeah.
Our rights are being eroded, and our founding fathers risked their lives, and all of our soldiers that go overseas risk their lives to defend our freedoms. So we need to stand up for them. It's time for us to put our big boy and big girl panties on and get out there and fight for a government that is responsive to the people. That's how it was. Sorry, didn't mean to get off.
No, I agree. And as I'm showing the public, we have beautiful landscapes. The horses are not destroying the environment in any way. They only enhance it with their manure droppings. I've actually personally photographed filmed horses where they step beside the brush. They don't step in the brush, And
in most locations, the horses have a symbiotic relationship with the range. Where we run into trouble is two things. One is we do have occasional, somewhat limited regional extreme droughts and springs dry up. When there's no water, all bets are off. And those are extreme extreme situations. It's just like, I lived in California for 40 years. I loved living there. Loma Prieta comes along and changes everything, So a lot of people's lives were disrupted. In Nevada, it's drought. You can have situations where there are true emergencies, even though day in and day out, it's not a problem. The other thing that we have is a lot of these horses are on multiple use lands, and it's not so much what the horses are doing with the land, but they provide, they pose, I should say, competition for some of the other uses on that land. If you're running a mine, you have to watch out for contamination and things like that. If there's other animals there, wildlife, horses, cattle, there's more scrutiny. And of course, the public lands grazing, you're sharing that grass that you've been permitted to let your cattle graze. You're sharing that grass with horses. So there's always this competition between the uses. The thing is that where I kind of get cranky as a Nevadan who lives on a wild horse range is either someone will take that extreme condition, such as we recently had in the Jackson Mountains. The place just went dry, and try to portray that happens everywhere in the state. It doesn't. Most cases, exactly as you described, is what we see out here. Yet, in other situations, we'll have people where there's been overuse by livestock, or there's been damage by other users of the range. And who are you going to blame? You're going to blame the horses. Are they going to come up and defend themselves? No.
Yeah, well, Craig Downer, wildlife ecologist, was out there, and he took photographs last July of the Virginia range horses and of the enormous thousands of heads of cattle. So you have that, competitive wellspring. And so I'm asking people to please curb your meat intake, because the meat intake is what's killing everything of our wildlife, from predators, from the coyotes to the wolves to the bears to the pumas. It's killing everything, and it all boils down back to us, So if we start doing what we're supposed to do, then perhaps the government will have no choice but to have to follow suit in curbing it as well, because there just won't be a business for the cattle industry or an interest for it to want to go out on these lands and remove the wild horses so they can have more grass, And
well, your hypothesis makes sense. But here's something that's really counterintuitive too. Not everybody, but there's a segment within the cattle industry that wants to see the horses pulled off and sold for meat. With cattle prices under pressure now, why would any intelligent business person want to generate a competing product? It just the joke around here is the cattle industry in many cases, and I've got some friends that got out of the cattle industry because they said, I'm going to move somewhere else in Nevada. You can't make a living because of the way things operate here is like 200 years of tradition unmarked by progress. They're trying to do things the way they were done 200 years ago, and science has evolved and range management's involved. And if you've talked to Craig, which I know you have, I mean, he understands stuff, and he's actually got some remarkable data and ideas on how the different uses on the range can be more compatible. It's just nobody wants to listen right now. The big money's in just ram these horses out of here, because except for us people, we the people who are concerned, the horses have no voice. Yeah. They're an easy target, just like our elderly, and that's another thing that concerns me, is that we have, and they're on both sides of the political scale, but there are politicians out there that are only concerned with the folks that get out there and vote and contribute to campaigns, and folks that have worked all their lives that don't have an articulate way of defending themselves are finding themselves getting.
Well, it's all coming back to us, because I think what they're doing is they're testing the waters, and they're realizing the American people are very weak, and they'll speak up, but they won't go any further than that. So they're becoming more violent. They're getting their weapons already. They've got their big zoot suits on, the police, with their SWAT team. Outfits on to terrorize us, and absolutely, so at what point do the American people do something, or at what point do we just, like the Jewish people ended up doing, going to the you know, to the gas chamber, thinking that they're going to some work farm. And that's what the government is doing. It's making us believe that we're never going to, well, we're never going to go that way. But that's, if they can do what they're doing to the wild horses, and the wild horses are, and the domestic horses are our messengers from God, from the Great Spirit, and what's happening to them, if they can do that to such a sacred, beautiful, awesome animal that rode us through history on their backs, then what I say to you folks, can they do to you, and are they doing to you? Look around what they're doing to you and understand that you had start better doing something. And the number one thing you can do nonviolently is to boycott the product that is making them so rich and so powerful that they can turn around and hurt you. And that's the meat industry. That's what they lobby up there in the Congress and sway the Congress people to vote how they want. And it's all coming back. It is karma. And whether you want to believe it or not, that's the karma, and that's what's happening. And if we think that it can't happen, it happened in World War II, and guess what? It's happening right before our faces now, because the government is not listening to us, and that's the first stage of development.
Yeah, when government is responsive, but it becomes controlling, that's
a
problem. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
No, it's just
I
obvious.
was a firefighter and a public employee for 30 years. I mean, you know, so actually, in a sense, I worked for the government. But, you know, of course, our mission was to be responsive to the public, which is why I have so little tolerance for other people, now that I'm a pensioner, that are feeding at the public trough, that aren't responsive to the public, but they have an agenda, and they're going to impose that agenda on the public. And what happens is, as my mom studied this, and she became a historian actually, is that over a period of time, and of course things were a little more intense in World War II. We were coming out of the Great Depression, and people were feeling desperate. But they started to accept the fact that they, you know, the name was sheep people. Yeah. They would just accept that whatever the government needed to do, because that's what had to be done to get out of this mess. You know, and then of course we see the focus of hate, and the focus of hate was, of course, they're directed to the Jews and to the Poles, and to the Hungarians, and the focus of hate is just blinds people. It's an emotional.
And their focus now is on hating the horses. And, you know,
on certain ethnic groups. Go to New York City. If you're a black person, they have what's called stop and frisk. The police can stop you anytime, frisk you down. If you refuse, they're going to drag you off.
Well, they can do that to anyone. They can do that to any white person, Chinese. You just get a bully. Yeah, you get a bully policeman who decides that he wants to have some fun with you. And I had that happen to me, as a matter of fact, a bully policeman, and I reported him right away afterwards. And I said I was very afraid of this man. I thought he might rape me. I was on a dirt road looking for a wildlife viewing station, and he asked for my ID, and I said, why are you asking for my ID? And he said, because you're carrying stuff on the roof. And I said, well, that's my luggage. And, you know, and I did, you know, that kind of thing. So I called his superior, and I met with him, and I said, this man needs to be taught some manners, and he frightened me, and that's, you know, so you have to kind of report them and do the Miranda clause and all that, because, you know, it's coming down to they're just getting worse and worse. We have to close, but I want to thank you so much. And why don't you tell the audience where they can help you send money for the wild horses?
There are several groups that are involved in recovering the wild horses from the Virginia range, and it's been pretty darn expensive. We're all pooling the money together, so I'll just give the address, the web address of our group. We're the LRTC Wild Horse Mentors, and the web address is, of course, www.whmentors, plural, mentors.org. whmentors.org. And there's a little PayPal button. There's actually two funds we have. One is for the legal defense fund for the horses and for the people that are working with the horses. The other goes directly to the expenses of trying to recover these horses. We also take care of the orphan foals. You know, the Brits do a lot of stuff out on the range, but right now where we're really just overrun is these dozens and dozens and dozens of horses that are getting brought in that don't go in any system. They're going directly to the livestock sale if the advocates don't intervene. So, and thank you, California, for taking so many of these horses. You people are wonderful.
Okay, so you go to the website wh.mentors, right?
No, WH-Mentors.
Okay. Mentors.org. Okay, I'll put that on the screen.
For Wild Horse. Yeah.
Okay, Wild Horse. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing, and really appreciate it.
Thanks
All right.
for caring. That's what keeps us going.
Okay.
Because sometimes we wonder why we're in this thing. But it's for the horses and it's for the people that can't be on the front lines who care.
Yeah. And people call Governor Sandoval's office and let him know that you're boycotting Nevada.
Please.
Okay.
Please let him know. And hopefully you won't have to cancel your trip because he'll get the message. And if he doesn't, at least he was warned.
Well, I think we're going to have to cancel the trip, because as long as these animals are still being removed, they haven't gotten the message, So
Yes,
threats aren't going to work. We're going to have to do it, All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Willis Lamb.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye. So, folks, I want to thank you for watching and listening. To save a foal and its mother from the inevitable slaughter that this government, this Auschwitz of our wild horses, and you can go to www.wildhorsementors.com. That's whmentors.com. And I hope you'll follow up with a call to the governor's office and boycott meat. That's the most important thing you can do on every level. Our next segment will be talking about what meat is doing to our planet, eating the meat habit, and what it is doing to your health. But first, we want to alert you to the criminal activity of Bureau of Land Management, which is a part of the Department of Interior. Secretary Salazar, who in my opinion is a criminal, and what I mean by a criminal is a person who breaks the law. Secretary Salazar is a rancher, comes from a rancher background, and as Secretary of Interior, he has ordered the removal of most of our wild horses that have been in the wild and belong to the American people. And they've warehoused them in these what they call long-term holding areas, and you cannot find out where they are. BLM has every excuse why they cannot. They're on private ranches, and there's too many of them, and it goes on and on. But it was recently discovered in a report done by ProPublica online that the BLM is happily selling them by the truckloads to a Tom Davis. Now, Tom Davis lives right next to Ken Salazar. What a coincidence. And Tom Davis is a known horse slaughter advocate. He has actually stated publicly that there's nothing more delicious than a young foal, a yearling foal. He has tried to start slaughter plants in the United States, and the BLM is selling them to him by the truckloads when they will not allow people who are trying to rescue these wild horses from their long-term holding more than 10 horses at a time. Yet they're selling them to Tom Davis at $10 a head. So this is just kind of the criminal activities that are going on within our government. I've called Panetta's office and asked him to please intervene and talk to the Secretary of Interior. No such luck. Not heard a word. So, whether it's Mitt Romney or it's Obama, you have a sector of the same party that are going to be doing disastrous things. And it's going to continue. And the only weapon you have is not to give these industries money to keep them powerful so they can do these things. And so if you would stop eating meat, you would send such a huge message to the people in power that they're no longer in power because they don't have the money. It's real simple. And I don't see any other way of us being able to accomplish anything other than violence. And it'll eventually come to that, I'm sure. Revolutions are started because the government becomes a lawless entity, and that creates chaos. And we have chaos now in our government. They don't listen to us. They don't obey their own laws. They expect us to obey their laws. And guess what, folks? It's coming down to the wire. So this is what they're doing to that cute little foal there. They just as soon send it to slaughter, and they just as soon send you to slaughter. You know, they could care less. The meat industry, I just learned from Congressman Moran's office, the USDA inspection for meat budget was cut by $20 million last year. That means that they're not able to inspect your meat. And then you wonder why you get these recalls, and your children are dying, and you're feeling sick, and you've got all these things, Alzheimer's, and which is associated with mad cow. So it's all coming back to bite you in the butt. And as the great Pythagoras, the mathematician who was probably the greatest thinker that ever lived and philosopher, he was a vegan, the father of veganism, and he said 2,500 years ago, if people ate suffering animals, they would become brute-like in nature. Well, that's what we've become. We're a nation of brute-like people that just want the burger at all cost. And we don't want to think about where it comes from, whether the animals are suffering or not. We don't want to think about that. But guess what? Then when it comes to your turn and you come down with cancer or whatever, they're pretty ruthless with you, aren't they? And this is just the beginning. So start paying attention and start doing your research. Realize that cancer is associated with meat eating and high blood pressure from the high cortisol in meat. And horses have it even more so. So that is a whole segment we'll be getting into, and I want to thank you for watching. Please call the governor and have these Virginia range horses remain where they are. Boycott Nevada. Thanks for watching.
Hi, this is Simone Netherlands at the Respect for Horses barn, full of rescued horses, giving you a little bit more information on what's happening on the subject of horse slaughter today.
On Thursday, October 11th, the European Commission published a document from the Food and Veterinary Office which evaluates the operation of controls over the production of horse meat for export to the European Union. On Friday, October 12th, horse slaughter plants temporarily shut down, reportedly because of failure of compliance with these European food safety standards on one or more shipments that arrived in France. Horse welfare organizations and many Americans alike were hopeful that this was a permanent situation and that an end had finally come to the cruel and fraudulent foreign horse slaughter industry that is preying on our American horses. On Monday morning, October 15th, it became apparent that it was only temporary and that horse slaughter plants were opening their doors once again to American horses trucked across our borders.
This document right here, which is the European Commission Food and Veterinary Office document, and this document states, their measures need to be taken to ensure the validity and authenticity of the affidavits for horses of U.S. origin slaughtered for export to the European Union linked to their traceability. What's been happening is these kill buyers have just been filling out these forms themselves, which is completely and utterly fraudulent, in order to purposely deceive the end consumer of the horse meat who's unknowingly consuming horse meat that's carcinogenic and very unhealthy. Horses in America are not bred nor intended for slaughter. Therefore, pretty much any horse owner knows these simple medications, which, like this one, it's phenylbutazone, and it is like aspirin for horses. Any horse owner knows that if your horse is in any kind of pain, this is the thing to give it. For example, dewormer. Any horse owner knows that you need to deworm a horse or he will get worms. It simply says not for use in horses for human consumption. The fact of the matter is that in America we do not breed and we do not intend horses for slaughter. And because of this fact, Every single horse in the racing industry, and most every single horse owned by private owners, has at one point in their life received any one of these medications. And there is over 130 of these substances that are actually banned for food safety purposes. So it's a serious food safety issue, besides for the horse welfare issue, and besides for the issue that it's about your tax dollars that are funding this unspeakable cruelty to our American horses.
Do we need horse slaughter in America?
That's what they would like us to believe. They would like us to believe that horse slaughter is a service-oriented business that will help us get rid of old and decrepit and sick horses. This is not the case. Horse slaughter, just like any other business, is a for-profit, demand-driven business. And 92% of all horses slaughtered, according to the USDA, are perfectly healthy and in the prime of their life. The amount of horses slaughtered is determined by the demand of horse meat abroad, not by any amount of unwanted horses.
What about abused and neglected horses?
The simple fact that we have abused and neglected horses means that those horses did not end up in horse slaughter. Their owners chose to abuse and neglect them instead of sending them to slaughter. Horse slaughter is available at every auction in the country. These people hung on to their horses, perhaps despite their ability to take care of them, because they did not want to see them end up in slaughter. Therefore, horse slaughter will never be a solution for this demographic of horses.
Can there ever be a passport or traceability system?
Well, you can trace it all you want, but it's going to be based on fraud and lies, because the fact remains that horses in America have received substances that are banned for human consumption because they were never intended for slaughter. So you can trace it, but you're going to find out that they've received the substances, then you're going to have to lie about it, and then you're going to have to trace that, and that's what they're going to be trying to do. But it will only be based on fraud and lies.
Respect for Horses and our sister organizations are asking for horse breed associations to take more responsibility. Instead of encouraging the breeding of horses, please discourage the breeding of all horses right now until the market stabilizes itself again. Turn those breed incentives into funds for horse rescues, into funds for gelding clinics, into funds for humane euthanasia. All we need is a little bit of a different attitude towards horses today. They are not a disposable product. After all, horses have literally brought us and carried us from the past into this day and age. They have gone the distance for us. They have plowed our fields and they have fought our battles. Let's all have a little more respect for horses.
All horse welfare organizations are asking our legislators to please co-sponsor the American Horse Slaughter Prevention Act, which is S. 1176 in the Senate and H.R. 2699 in the House. We need to pass the American Horse Slaughter Prevention Act now. Thank you.
When I sat down with former President Bill Clinton this week in New York City at the Clinton Global Initiative, we spoke about the U.S. economy, the election, world affairs. But the part of the interview that grabbed so much attention was about his dramatic weight loss and the diet that helped him shed 24 pounds.
I live on beans, legumes, vegetables, fruit. I drink a protein supplement every morning. No dairy. I drink almond milk mixed in with fruit and a protein powder, so I get the protein for the day when I start the day out. And it changed my whole metabolism, and I lost 24 pounds, and I got back to basically what I weighed in high school. But I did it for a different reason. I mean, I wanted to lose a little weight, but I didn't dream this would happen. I did it because after I had this stent put in, I realized that even though it happens quite often that after you have bypasses, you lose the veins because they're thinner and weaker than arteries. The truth is that it clogged up, which means that the cholesterol was still causing buildup in my vein that was part of my bypass. And thank God I could take the stents. I don't want it to happen again. So I did all this research, and I saw that 82% of the people since 1986 who have gone on a plant-based, no dairy, no meat of any kind, no chicken, turkey. I eat very little fish. Once in a while I'll have a little fish, not often. If you can do it, 82% of the people who've done that have begun to heal themselves. Their arterial blockage cleans up. The calcium deposit around their heart breaks up.
Let's discuss what the former president said with the doctors behind the diet that helped Mr. Clinton change his life. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn is the author of Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, and Dr. Dean Ornish is the author of The Spectrum. Let me go to Dr. Esselstyn first. He mentioned both of you for inspiring him to begin this diet. Walk us through this diet, Dr. Esselstyn. Why is this diet so good, especially for those individuals who have a history of heart disease?
Well, thank you, Wolf, for having me on this evening with my good friend, Dean Ornish. There's no question that if the truth were known that coronary artery disease is a toothless paper tiger that need never exist. And if it does exist, it need never, ever progress. What we've heard from President Clinton is the remarkable change that he's been willing to make to remove completely from his nutrition those foods which we know will devastate and injure the inner lining of your arteries. And the remarkable thing is the capacity that the body has to heal itself. And when you do what President Clinton has done, where you completely try to remove any foods that are going to injure your vessel, the body has this remarkable capacity to begin to heal itself. And I'm afraid that as a medical profession, we perhaps have fallen down and really emphasized too much the drugs and the procedures and the operations which really treat the symptoms. They do not treat the causation of this illness. This is one of the few times since Hippocrates that we have not told patients about the causation of their illness.
Dr. Ornish, are you on the exact same page as Dr. Esselstyn is?
Yes, I am, and I want to just say I love and respect President Clinton, and so I was thrilled to hear that he's making these changes because I want him to live a long time, like so many people do, and whatever your politics, he can inspire many people to make these changes. And what we've shown, you know, we tend to think it has to be a new drug or a new laser, something really high-tech and expensive to be powerful. And what we've done in more than 33 years of research is show that these simple changes that we make in our lives, like what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, and how much love and support we have, can actually begin to reverse, not just prevent, but actually reverse chronic illnesses like heart disease and so on. And we found that almost more than 82% of the people who made these changes, as President Clinton indicated, were actually able to reverse the disease. So rather than getting a quick fix like a bypass or a stent does, which doesn't treat the underlying cause, it's a little like mopping up the floor around a sink without turning off the faucet. It keeps coming back unless you change what caused it.
Is this diet, Dr. Esselstyn, no dairy, no meat, no chicken, basically no fish? Is this diet for everyone or only for those who have heart disease or a history of heart disease?
One other thing I would add, and no oils, no processed oils.
When you say no, like olive oil, even olive oil, which supposedly is pretty healthy.
I'm afraid I'm going to have a divergence of opinion there. Yes, I would include absolutely olive oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, corn oil, soybean oil. They're out. Now, you know, since we know that these foods are injuring people, why would we ever want to have them on the menu of our school children? When you question, why wait until people do have heart disease? We know, for instance, that if we do autopsies on our GIs who died in Korea and Vietnam, that roughly 80% of these young GIs will already have gross evidence of coronary disease you can see without a microscope. if we are going to ever make a breakthrough in this epidemic of cardiac disease, we really have to start when it's young. This is pretty
So
important.
you're saying that young kids should not drink milk? Is that what you're saying, Dr. Ornish?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that there's a spectrum of choices. And what President Clinton is doing is what you might call the pound of cure. If you're trying to reverse a chronic disease like heart disease, we also show that these same changes can stop or reverse the progression of early prostate cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol. Then you need to make bigger changes. But if you're just trying to lose a few pounds or get your cholesterol down, you can start by making moderate changes. And if that's enough, great. If not, you can do more. What matters most is your overall way of eating and living. So if you indulge yourself one day, eat healthier the next.
Dr. Esselstyn, is this the diet that you personally live on?
The one that I described earlier, yes, I most certainly do. My dad had his first heart attack at age 43, and I've been eating this way for over 26 years.
And Dr. Ornish, is that the way you live? No chicken, no meat, no dairy, I guess some of the fun things in life? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
You know, the old joke is, am I going to live longer? Is it just going to seem longer if I eat this way? And it's not all or nothing. What you include in your diet is as important as what you exclude. There are hundreds of thousands of protective substances. I also recommend people take 3 or 4 grams a day of fish oil because the omega-3 fatty acids can be so protective. So
we heard Dr. Esselstyn say no oil.
Well, we're slightly different opinion on that particular one. I think the omega studies have shown that just 3 or 4 grams a day of fish oil can reduce your incidence of sudden cardiac death by up to 80%. It can reduce your risk of prostate and breast cancer. If you're a pregnant woman or breastfeeding, it can raise your child's IQ. And so I think the evidence there is pretty compelling.
I take fish oil, Dr. Eggleston. Is that a bad idea?
Well, I'm not going to really wrestle with Dean over fish oil. We have so much that is in common, and we're striving together to really make the basic point here really is that by eating these whole foods and getting away from processed foods, getting away from the dairy, anything with a mother, anything with a face, meat, fish, and chicken, it's so incredible how powerful the body can be. And if we're going to have a seismic revolution of health in this country, which is really right at our fingertips, when the major behavior that has to change is, interestingly enough, our food. That is the absolutely key card. It trumps everything.
I agree. And let me just say this. You know, when you make these changes, because these mechanisms are so dynamic, your brain gets more blood. You think more clearly. You have more energy. Your skin gets more blood, so you don't age as quickly. Even your sexual organs get more blood in the same way that Viagra works. So, yeah, you'll probably live longer, but you'll also feel better. And what's sustainable is joy and pleasure and freedom. And when you make these changes, most people find they feel so much better so quickly. It reframes the reason for change from fear of dying to joy of living, and that's what's sustainable.
Dr. Dean Ornish and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, you got a good shout out from President Clinton. He's on your diet. He's doing the best he can. He's very happy. I saw him in action eating some of those beans and vegetables away from some of the other fun foods, as we like to say. And let's hope he lives a long and healthy life. Guys, thanks very much for coming in.
Amen.
Thank you.
And thanks, Caldwell. You're doing great work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dean. Keep it up.
All right, guys.